Modi ji visited Japan today to attend the state funeral ceremony for the former Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Prime Minister's visit was a personal opportunity for Modi ji to honor the memory of former Prime Minister Abe, whom he considered a dear friend and a great champion of the India-Japan relationship. During the brief visit, the Prime Minister also met with the current Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Mrs. Abe and conveyed his personal condolences as well as those on behalf of India. Prime Minister Abe was assassinated while on an election campaign tour on July the 8th in the northern Japanese city of Nara. India had declared a day of state mourning for him on July the 9th. Ambassador Deepa Gopalan Wadhwa joins us this evening to explain what was so special about Mr. Abe that Mr. Modi felt he had to personally go to convey his condolences. Good evening, Deepa.
Good evening, Nilava. Lovely to be on the show.
Why was Prime Minister Abe so special for India? What was it about his tenure as Prime Minister that made it so memorable for the India-Japan relationship?
Well, I think Prime Minister Modi, today when he met Prime Minister Kishida, he spoke about the very special role that Prime Minister Abe played in strengthening and deepening the India-Japan relationship. He was Prime Minister for 2 terms. One was a very brief term, 2006 to 2007. It was during that term that he came to India. He addressed both houses of parliament, and there, he gave that famous speech on the confluence of the seas, which in a way launched the concept of the Indo-Pacific, which very much involved India in the dynamism of the entire Asian region, including ASEAN and all the way up to Japan and East Asia. So he came back in 2012, and I think it was during that period, he was 4 terms in office. He visited India 3 times. Our prime ministers, as you know, have annual summits. At each meeting, there was something very consequential announcements made at these visits. For example, it was during Prime Minister Modi's visit in 2014 that they talked about making our relationship into a special strategic and global partnership. In 2014 January, he was the first ever Japanese Prime Minister to be invited as chief guest to our Republic Day parade. It was during his time that the Empress of Japan visited India for the first time, and actually to look at any aspect of the relationship, be it political, economic, security, defense, you find a very, very marked deepening of the relationship during his time. We also find that, he was a great ideator. And in giving the world the concept of the free and open Indo-Pacific, he included India and gave it a very important role. And in operationalizing this vision, he talked about the quadrilateral security dialogue in which India was a very important pillar. And thereby he drew India in to what his vision was for the region as well as what his vision was for the world.
So, Mr. Abe and Prime Minister Modi also developed this very close personal bond. They used to follow each other on Twitter as well, possibly even before Prime Minister Modi became the Prime Minister. So, it was also this very special bond that took Prime Minister Abe to Ahmedabad during his tenure in office around 2014 or 2015 or thereabouts. And so, that particular bond also, I think, really helped the bilateral relationship to flourish enormously. Would that be a correct assessment?
Well, let me tell you that the change in the Indo-Japan relationship started in about 2000. When Japan, I think we looked at the role of India, it was our growing economic, heft and our own growing, I think, military power and, recognized that we were a very important part of Asia. So the change in the relationship really started in 2000. And, various prime ministers and governments on both sides. On the Japanese side, we first had the LDP government. It was Prime Minister Modi, followed by Prime Minister Koizumi, Prime Minister Abe. And on our side, of course, then we had the NDA. It was Prime Minister Vajpayee, and later Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and then Prime Minister Modi. My point of saying is that this is a relationship which has grown irrespective of who the governments were and who the leaders were. because this is a relationship that is extremely important to both countries. But having said that, without a doubt, Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Abe went beyond the normal relationship between two leaders and had a very special personal bond. I mean, which was so very evident in their interactions. I mean, Prime Minister Abe being taken not only to Gujarat, being also taken to Varanasi. Prime Minister Abe, when he came to India, Prime Minister Abe takes Prime Minister Modi to his personal residence. And the entire relationship, one saw that there was a very, very special personal bonding that went beyond the bilateral relationship that we had. And I think this has come out in, Prime Minister Modi's very, very obvious, deep sorrow at the loss of his friend, which he expressed today. His declaration of a day of mourning at that point of time, state mourning in India. And the fact that he's taken this just not even for 24 hours, for less than 24 hours, to be there at the state funeral of his friend.
Prime Minister Abe was very largely responsible for really pushing the concept of Quad, as you said, the quadrilateral of four democracies. Now, very high representatives, of course, the Prime Minister has gone from here. I believe the Australian Prime Minister is also in Tokyo for the funeral, and the US Vice President Kamala Harris, I think, was the representative from the United States. Now, the Quad as a concept has arrived, as it were, today, after sort of an initial hitch. And that very largely is perhaps Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's most lasting contribution to global peace, as it were. Would that be a right assessment again?
Well, the concept, first of all, of the free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific. What Prime Minister Abe did was that there was the Indian Ocean and there was the Pacific Ocean. Till that point of time, you talked about the Asia Pacific. The Asia Pacific was centered around East Asia and the ASEAN. It did not include India. By talking of the confluence of the two seas, by making India and Japan, as it were, the bookends of this concept of the free and open Indo-Pacific, what Prime Minister Abe did was in way include us in this very, very dynamic economic region that the Indo-Pacific, that Asia has become. But then this was a vision, and this was also a vision of a rule-based international order, that there would be democracies, and they would work for peace and prosperity of the region, but based on certain principles. And obviously what the concern was the growing assertiveness of China, which really broke no rules that were existing rules that were there. So it was directed, in a way, it was because of the rise of China, but not even so. I think it was just about peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific and the fact that we had to work together. Now that was a vision that he had. Now how did you operationalize that vision? And that operationalizing of the vision was the Quad, as started off as a quadrilateral strategic initiative dialogue among these four democracies, the large four democracies of the Indo-Pacific, which was Japan itself, India, Australia, and the US. And initially, yes, you're quite right. I mean, there was hesitation, particularly the Australians actually backed out because I think there was a change of government and pressure of the Chinese and so on. But when Prime Minister Abe came back again in 2012, and I think the world got much more conscious of the, really deteriorating security environment in that region due to, I think, the advent of a very, very assertive China because of North Korea and various other threats to the region, that this thing was revived. This concept of the quadrilateral, the Quad, was revived. Now we have working groups which have been formed, and we have actually identified 7 or 8 issues on which these four countries will work together, but not only for them by themselves, but bringing in the other countries of the region. And the other important thing is of this concept of the free and open Indo-Pacific is that started by Prime Minister Abe, but everybody now, all the countries in the region, they see the importance of this entire concept and the principles behind it. And so you have ASEAN today with its own Indo-Pacific policy, and also other actors from Europe who feel that this is an area of great importance to them, where they have a stake, and therefore you have different countries of the region now stating their own Indo-Pacific policy. So for all of this, who do we have to thank but Prime Minister Abe?
Well, it's one of those sort of tragedies that happen, I guess. It's really quite sad because he genuinely was an absolute well-wisher who wanted very good things to happen to India. But we've run right out of time. Deepa, thank you so very much for for all of those insights and inputs that you gave us. Thank you.
Thank you, Nilova.